Hello and welcome to Pop Screen, the podcast that still associates that song with the British Airways advert. We are that corner of the Geek show that likes to look at the good, the bad and the ridiculous of movies either starring, by or about pop stars. No, the podcast covers a wide range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a filmmaker and video artist and a critic for the Geek show. And I've been joined this week by...
Mick, hello. Occasional visitor to this parish.
Yes, very true. Is there anywhere people can find you, Nick?
Rocking gently backwards and forwards in a corner most days, but other than that, you can find me on the comic book adaptation review podcast that I can't remember the name of.
What? That's the most extravagantly failed attempt at self-promotion we've had on this show, and we've had a few.
I don't do it for the self-promotion.
Which
what
good
do we
job.
call it? It used to be called Behold.
That's the one.
That's the one. The problem with Behold as a title for a podcast, I don't know if you've actually tried searching it randomly outside of having access to the links, but it's a very popular title for any kind of Christian fundamental podcast.
It is.
Or
yes.
evangelistic. So, just we're spotted because we're the ones that occasionally have Deadpool featured in the logo.
Yes, I think I've appeared on about 9 episodes of that Christian podcast just because I replied to the wrong email.
Yes, apparently I now lead a cult in Iowa. So
yes, we are reconvened, as Mick says, for the first time in ages, and we're reconvened to mark a pretty noteworthy anniversary because it is 5 years. And then another 5 years since David Bowie died.
Is it really?
It is, yes.
I mean, that's almost enough for like another season of Stranger Things to be filmed.
10 years ago, this January, David Bowie died just days after releasing his final album, Black Star. It takes, I happily admit, very little to persuade me to do a David Bowie episode, but this seemed like a very good reason to do one. And you mentioned to me in a chat that you had not only just watched the film that we are about to talk about, but you'd also watched quite a bit of its TV spin-off.
Yes. In one of those early examples of the TV industry cashing in on Hollywood IP straight away while striking while the iron's hot. A mere 14 years after the film came out, came The Hunger, the series. A sort of horror,
like an anthology series.
It's kind of like a horror-based Twilight Zone, if you like. And there are 2 series of it. Now, the thing is, I'm beginning to think I dreamt whatever it was that I'd been watching when I posted, because due to various other commitments, I kind of lost the time to start catching up on the Hunger TV series. There are 2 series of it. I managed to watch most of series 1, which has got Terence Stamp as a sort of narrator. He's kind of like a cross between David Bowie's Goblin King and the shopkeeper from Mr. Ben. Imagine that, if you will.
I can't.
Well, watch an episode and you will. And the biggest disappointment, especially coming into this this recording, is season 2. Terence Stamp was unavailable.
Yeah.
And Dame Dave took over.
Or was that the one you couldn't find a copy of?
Yeah. So,
oh.
and this is the thing that intrigues me. I don't know whether David Bowie does it as another incarnation, if you like, of Terence Stamp's character, or whether he reprises his role from the movie.
Yes, because the door is left a bit open for that, I guess.
And the two, I mean, there's no chronological. I mean, this could be something that he did in his downtime between scenes in the movie. You know, it's not. There's no linear continuation of any of the plot strands from the Hunger film in the series.
Yes.
So, in fact, it's basically a name that it shares.
Yes, I saw an episode of the Terence Stamp era show with young Daniel Craig in it. And it has to be said, and I mean this with nothing but love, but the narration, the introductions that Stamp and later Bowie would do are the most late 90s things I have seen in my life.
Indeed.
They are full of that kind of bleach bypass, flash cut. Sevens just come out and everything wants to look a bit like the title sequence to that.
Yeah, and there's weird focus shifts and
yes.
Yeah. I have to point out that regardless of how this recording go, it is not the worst thing creatively to mark the 10th anniversary of Bowie's passing.
No, in fact, I'm going to spoil it a bit and say that I quite like this film, but carry on. What would be the worst?
The release yesterday by erstwhile Bowie collaborator Stephen Patrick Morrissey of his latest single.
Yeah. I keep getting YouTube pushing this at me and I have yet to succumb. It's called Makeup is a Lie, so I assume he's like graduated for his inspiration from Stormfront onto Incel forums.
Well, you know that song he sang about throwing his arms around Paris?
Yeah.
Which was actually quite good.
Not bad, yeah. Not his best, but all right.
Imagine him doing a follow-up single, but he got, I don't know, Uwe Boll to direct the video or something. Right? It's a pale imitation of that song. It's awful. Even in the world of Morrissey dirges, it's a dirge.
Yes. So. And this is a trap that Bowie avoided, didn't he? Because I mean, he had his moment in the 80s where he did seem to be going through a bit of a midlife crisis. Like if you listen to something like Never Let Me Down or either the Tin Machine albums, there's a surprising amount of "Hey, little girl, just walking down the street" kind of lyrics, and it's all very strange because he tended to promote these albums by saying, you know, I'm going back to my roots. And it's like, okay, I don't remember your roots as being extremely heterosexual cock rock.
Yeah.
I would go so far as to say it was kind of the opposite of that, really, wasn't it?
I don't know. I think Laughing Gnome is the epitome of.
One can resist the erotic allure of early Bowie.
And Rubber Band.
Yes. Over the Wall we go. God, what a panty dropper that is. But yeah, beyond that, it only really struck me after he died, but he was really the first rock star who worked out what an aging rock star should do in order to avoid being totally embarrassing. Like,
Yes.
he kept
Yes.
up to date, but he wasn't trying to persuade you that he was still a teenager. He kept up to date in the way that a tuned in older man should be up to date.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember growing up, and my older half brother used to listen to Bowie on Top of the Pops and stuff like that. And I think he had a couple of Bowie singles that he listened to when he was home. And then I remember sort of during my musical evangelism,
Yeah.
the Let's Dance stuff came out. And it was like, and now David Bowie's new single. David Bowie's he still going?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, this is going to be awful, isn't it? Because you'd already seen artists like Cliff Richard and people like that sort of do all right in a sort of ballads for the mums type way, and then try to reinvent themselves with being down with the kids with things like Wired for Sound and stuff.
Yes.
So you'd seen that sort of creepy middle-aged rock star vibe coming, and then you go, and then he'd realise that actually musicals and ballads was where to stay, and maybe the odd religious song about Christmas time.
But
whereas
yeah,
Bowie, when he came back, he was relevant still.
Yeah.
But not in a way where he was forcibly trying to be trendy or hip or down with the kids. Yes, there were some jungle influences and stuff in the 90s and stuff like that. But it was an influence. It wasn't him trying to be a jungle artist.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And that's the thing. He wasn't one to jump on bandwagons. It's like I remember when Kylie was out of the picture because she had a breast cancer treatments and stuff. Madonna seemed to try to step into that gap in the market and just look like someone's drunken auntie at a wedding. With that strange ABBA sample thing that she did.
Yes. I remember thinking that was a big falling off for Madonna when it came out. It now sounds like...
A fallen Madonna, you say?
That's good, yes. I mean, it now sounds like an oasis of dignity compared to some of the stuff she did afterwards, but anyway. But yes, yeah, and I think one of the secrets that Bowie had to making that dignified is that barring some of the things like the jungle stuff, which I kind of like just because it is such a mad swing, but in a lot of cases, he was reconnecting with younger artists who themselves were largely influenced by Bowie. I mean, we mentioned Morrissey. Morrissey will now tell you that he never had any influence from David Bowie whatsoever because he's a lying cur.
And also whilst cancelling the latest gig where he planned to do Saturday Night Drive-In.
Yes.
But
no. But this had started even before The Hunger and before Let's Dance, when he did Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, which had that wonderful billboard campaign that said often imitated, never bettered. And it had, people like Steve Strange in the video to Ashes to Ashes. Not... Again, it would have looked like bandwagon hopping if it wasn't for the fact that those Blitz kids and those new romantics were so obviously in debt to David Bowie in the first place.
Exactly, and an artist sort of from that era that I went to see recently, Adam Ant, often cited Bowie as an influence in terms of the theatricality and the staging of Ant music.
Yes.
And again, didn't ape Bowie, didn't copy Bowie, didn't tried to be Bowie, but took those traits of reinvention, of iconography and all the rest of it, and made it his own thing. And that's what Bowie always did when he came back. He'd take the influences, he'd take jungle or heavy metal or whatever was around at the time, and it's a little bit like making a curry paste to make your marinade,
Yeah.
That's what he'd do. He'd sit there at the chopping board. I'll take a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. Put it up, grind it up, make it into a paste. Use my lyric making technique of cutting up paper and stuff like that, and see what melange I can come up with. That's a good word for a podcast, isn't it?
That's a good word for a podcast. Also, this is the second pop screen in a row where we've referred to the William S. Burroughs, Brian Gysin cut-up technique. So don't say that we don't give you some high culture here, listeners.
We pride ourselves on it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the lesbian vampire film. This is...
What, the one with Matthew Horn and James Corden? Which, if you compare the genre of lesbian vampire films, that one will always come bottom.
Yeah, it's nice to know that anyone who embarks on a new one will know that, they'll never be the worst. There's a security in that. And to some people, this is the best. And I would not go that far, but I was surprised at how much I got on with this film. I think there were big, glaring things wrong with it. It has massive pacing problems. It has one central piece of casting that I think is insane, but I think a lot of it works.
I think my basic problem with The Hunger and what sets it apart from it's a really great vampire movie of its era.
Yeah.
But it's only a good vampire movie.
Yes, I'll go with that. I think that's fair.
And I don't think, for me personally, Tony Scott ever really overcame the hurdle of jumping from the short form to the long form. Everything he does feels like a movie, a music video or an advert.
Yeah.
And then the pacing problems come in because he has to link those set pieces somehow. And that's where he struggles.
I think that's very true. I think the odd thing is that, like his brother Ridley, a lot of the short films and adverts that he did start his career doing are really distractingly arty. Like his credit directly before this was an episode of a French language anthology series based on the work of Henry James. It's quite a long way from what he would become, which is the guy who made Top Gun.
Yeah. I think Top Gun was probably the sort of tipping point where he finally sort of got the hang of a long form piece. He also moved away from that. It's got to look cool. Not it's got to look good. It's got to look cool. So the cinematography all feels very closed in and like a pop video. I mean, especially the opening sequence of this film, which is basically a music video for Bauhaus's Bela Lugosi's Dead.
Yes, yeah.
And it in the context of the movie, it works quite well. But it's kind of within this movie, it's one of the stronger sequences because it's in his safe zone. Right, I've got a band. They look cool, and they're singing a song in a nightclub. I can nail this. Over here, I've got this emotional exposition piece that...
Oh, dear.
Maybe I should have spent a bit more time working on, because that bit is in the bag.
Yeah, the opening to this is a very odd montage where, as Mick says, you do have Bauhaus performing what's generally regarded to be the first goth song, Bela Lugosi's Dead.
It's kind of... And I think the reason it's regarded as the first goth song is because that's easier than trying to pigeonhole it in the existing genres of the time, because it's kind of industrial metal synth new wave
post-punky.
post-punk.
Yeah. I think you can point to artists like Susie and the Banshees and The Cure, who were already established at the time that this was happening, and who were obviously like steps on the way. But none of them were making heavily synthesized songs about Bela Lugosi. I think that's the point at which you have to say, oh yeah, this is goth now.
Yeah, and of course, at this point, there's a certain cross-section of our audience who are going off to look up who Bela Lugosi is.
I think there's probably more of our audience who are looking at Bauhaus than are looking at Bela Lugosi. I think we have
I'll
a
be
lot
ashamed
of
of them
horror fans in So yeah, you've got this happening at the start, but you've also got this montage, which is the montages in this film are very odd because there's no way, and I don't know whether it's a deliberate stylistic kind of alienation effect thing he's doing, or whether it's just beginners sort of naive error. But there's no way to tell where anything is happening. You assume that these things are not all happening in the same place, if only because it would be quite odd for Bowie to have Bauhaus performing in his kitchen. But you've got no
say that. Well, you say that like there's anything that could be defined as odd where Bowie's doing anything.
That is actually something that Bowie has probably had happen. Yes, I now realise my mistake.
But you're right. There's no real anchor to give you any kind of spatial or temporal continuity. It sort of mixes the whole sequence up. You understand exactly what's happening and what has happened.
Yeah.
Just not necessarily in the order it happened.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah.
But it is our first look at Bowie as John Blaylock, and I love that his first line in this movie is complaining that his champagne bucket has no ice in it.
Yes.
There is a moment where you think, is this his first scripted line, or is he just pissed off at the catering on set?
But there's also an internal logic problem there. Because he sends the person who has only just arrived in that location and therefore would not have any idea where ice was kept to go rectify the situation.
Yes, yeah, this is very true.
There's no ice. Well, what if the nearest place to get ice is a supermarket 2 miles away?
Yeah.
She don't know.
But he's a vampire, man. Time and distance means nothing to him.
But yeah.
So yeah, he's one of this movie's central trio, all of whom are very sort of big names to get for your first film. There's Bowie, there's Susan Sarandon playing a researcher into progeria, a real life disease that Susan Sarandon cannot pronounce. And there's also Catherine Deneuve, who I think is very good until you realise she's meant to be an Egyptian princess, and you think, why have you cast the most French person who ever lived as an Egyptian? This is Highlander level miscasting to me.
It is, yeah. Sean Connery as the Spaniard.
Yes.
Do you know? There's, and I love Susan Sarandon, I really do.
Of course.
But there are parts in this movie where I feel that her character is actually Janet Weiss grown up.
It is a situation that Janet would definitely get herself into, isn't it? Yes.
And it's like And I think there's a couple of scenes as revelations are made where the look on her face is, oh no, not again.
Yeah. I'd never considered this film as a stealth Rocky Horror Show remake, but it absolutely
it's an improvement
is.
on Shock Treatment.
Yeah.
But then what isn't? So that said, 1983.
Yeah.
If you were going to cast an older actress to play a maturing vampire whose sensuality, there's only one name on the list, really, and she's in it. It's Catherine Deneuve.
Yes, I suppose. Yes. Yeah. I can see where you're coming from. I just think once you do have Catherine Deneuve, do you not slightly change the backstory? Can she not be part of Ancien Regime France or?
Well, yeah, and I guess this is going back to what you said at the top of the recording. There's a naivety here from a new to cinema director, a new to long form director.
Yeah.
And I think there's elements of it where even the main cast fall back on sort of former glories. There are times in this where you see the Blaylock character walking around town, and he's every inch Thomas Newton.
Yes, I'll tell you what he is actually. Have you seen Moon Age Daydream, the documentary about Bowie that came out a few years back?
No, I've not seen that one.
There's a very interesting recurring bit in Moon Age Daydream, which is just shots of Bowie wandering around in, it's like Thailand or Vietnam, an Asian country, but not a big bustling metropolis like, Tokyo or Beijing would be. It's quite spare and lonely. And this comes from I forget the photographer's name, but it was the guy who did Ricochet, the book of photos of Bowie on the Serious Moonlight tour. He was hired to do a promo film for it, and it was rejected because, he'd done a beautiful promo film for Bowie, but the Bowie he's promoting is basically the Bowie of the Berlin trilogy. If they'd released it back then, it would have been spot on for the image he was going for. But they're trying to sell him as America's next big sort of blonde, handsome pop star. Yeah. And he's got this promotional film of him just sort of staring at an escalator at 2:00 in the morning, and it's like it's not what they're going for. But you could splice a lot of it into The Hunger, and it would not look out of place at all.
Yeah, and I think, and actually, I'm thinking about it. Big screen roles. What's the one where he plays Tesla?
The Prestige.
That's got a very Thomas Newton look to it as well.
I think it's something that's always going to be hovering around Bowie's on-screen persona because, of course, Nicholas Roy cast him in The Man Who Fell to Earth after seeing Cracked Actor, the Arena documentary that Alan Yentob made about him, and just thinking, well, that's him. That's just perfectly who Thomas Jerome Newton is.
Yeah, and I think there's an element to Bowie on screen that's akin to Tom Baker, which is you can give Tom Baker any Shakespearean character, any classic hero or villain, and what you'll get is Tom Baker in the appropriate costume.
Yes, completely. Yeah,
which is the genius.
Yeah, this isn't a criticism. Some actors just have such a powerful on and off screen persona that part of the sort of one of the things you have to do when you're casting them is to say, can I picture David Bowie or Tom Baker or Tilda Swinton or whoever doing this?
And I think this is why you never see them. You never see in their early roles them cast as third functionary on the left.
No.
because
Like Tom Baker's breakthrough part was as Rasputin, and the die is cast there, isn't it?
Exactly. You can't see them playing estate agent in background.
No.
Do you know?
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, of course, Bowie has this sort of trump card in that he did a few like commercials and short films in the 60s, but then his pop career took off to such an extent that he did not have to work his way up playing, second burger chef or something like that. He could just go straight from being in a TV commercial, and then 5 years later, he's the lead role in The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah. Indeed.
And then in 1983, he's this, and I think this is like an interesting artifact. This is an interesting point in Bowie's career because he's done Scary Monsters. He's got out of that famously brutal album a year contract that he was locked into for the 1970s. And after that, he takes a bit of a break. He does some extracurricular things, some of which, like, a duet with Queen, are things that turned out to be massive and iconic and are still remembered as like quintessential Bowie things. And some of them are quite weird sort of one-offs. At the time that he does The Hunger, he just finished starring in Baal, a TV production of Bertolt Brecht's first rarely staged play, directed by Alan Clark, who did The Firm and Scum and many other very hard-hitting, very controversial films. And then he goes on straight to this. And this is a more commercial film in a lot of ways than Baal. I mean, my God, I've seen videos in art galleries that are more commercial than Baal, but it's also
Brecht's a hard sell.
He did, yeah. And this is the Brecht film that people who will happily put on the Caucasian chalk circle will go, "Oh God, we're not doing Baal, obviously."
I like Brecht, but there are limits.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So this is like, if that cycle had continued and if he'd returned from the break and done something that's more in the vein of Low or even Scary Monsters, this would be considered quite a nice commercial thing to have in your back pocket.
Yeah.
But it comes out at the point where he does Let's Dance, where he decides quite strategically to start off the new phase of his recording career where he does own his masters and has more control over what he does and when he does it. He decides to start this with the biggest assault on the pop charts he's ever made. And in that context, this is quite weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Because, as you say, cinematically, it's pretty commercial, as opposed to something a bit more art house like Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah.
Probably not as mainstream as Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, but I'm not sure what year that came out.
I think the same year as this. He made it after, but I think it came out the same year.
Right, okay. So he's got two commercial cinematic things in the bag. Yes, he does Let's Dance, which is commercial. The videos are quite arty, though.
True.
Was this a period where he took a risk with Mr. Lawrence and The Hunger? Because they could have both gone either way.
Of course, yes, yeah.
I mean, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence arguably came out in that lull period for sort of war movies.
Yeah.
Where they weren't as heady as they were in the immediate post-war eras, and by post-war I mean World War II and Vietnam.
I mean, the other thing about Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, in terms of its commercial risk factor, is that it's the first film Nagisa Oshima had directed after In the Realm of the Senses. Compared to that, it's him on Good Behaviour, but you don't sign up for a film made by the director who's just made in the realm of the censors, a film that the Japanese censors saw and thought, "Oh Jesus, we're banning this." That is still kind of a risk.
Exactly. And this is, it's an unknown director, relatively speaking. Yeah. It's a solid cast, but when was Catherine Deneuve's previous box office draw?
Yes, very true. Yeah.
Susan Sarandon.
Well, she'd been working with Louis Malle a lot at that time, which had given her a lot of credibility, and some of the films had even been fairly successful. But it's still
that
not.
It was critical credibility rather than
Yes.
commercial credibility. We were still a few years away from Thelma and Louise.
Completely, yeah.
So again, jumping onto that, it's like, what's going to happen here?
Yeah, very true. And I think it's to his credit that someone of his stature is working with a director whose background is exclusively like short films and TV episodes at this point.
Yeah.
I think part of the commercial quality of The Hunger, the sense that it is a commercial film, comes a lot from what followed it rather than from what it is. I'm not sure this aesthetic is associated with mainstream Hollywood productions by 1983. By 1987, yes, absolutely.
I think this is an aesthetic precursor to the rest of the 80s.
Very much so.
And
yes.
I think those who, because I lived through the 80s, Graham. I was explaining this to
most of them.
I was explaining this to my daughter.
Yeah.
Last night we were watching old reruns of Top of the Pops. The 4 recordings that they've still got that are broadcastable.
Yes.
And we were going through 1980. We did some 1981, some 1982. Whoever selected this selection, by the way, was steadfastly ignoring Paul Weller's output in the 80s because they went from the beginning of 82, which was a bit of a lull period for the Jam because the big period for them in 82 was at the end of the year when the Split came and the Gift came out and stuff. And then they leapt to 1987, which again was a bit of a lull year for the Style Council. So they were just tormenting me, really. So, but yeah, we were watching things like Shalimar and Shack Attack.
Yes.
And The Return of the Gap Band. But the stuff that was really looking like the 80s, because they all looked like 70s throwbacks.
Yeah.
But the 80s stuff, it was all Human League with those stark suits and tie looks, but with Bauhaus style haircuts and stuff. Yeah. And that's where this tied in with a zeitgeist. It's very much of its time.
Yes.
If anyone decided, do you know what because we're in the era of the remake, right?
Of course.
So when someone goes to a studio and says, we need an updated version of The Hunger.
And it has been mooted. It has been whispered about.
Oh, God, no.
It has. Yes, I'm sorry to say that, but it has.
Oh, good God, no. Who are we going to have? Who are we going to have as Blaylock? Ryan Gosling?
I mean, you could have chosen a lot worse, considering that Blaylock is basically, a pop star role.
Actually, I've got just this afternoon, just before I logged onto the room for the podcast, I've suddenly got a I won't say renewed, because Ryan Gosling, I can take him and leave him, but a renewed respect for him, because although I enjoyed it as a movie, I didn't realise it was him in Lars and the Real Girl.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a very versatile actor. I feel
Yeah.
like anyone who can give the performances he does in like The Nice Guys and Drive
Yeah.
is very versatile.
But I think the problem is I've seen him in things like Blade Runner 2049.
Oh yeah, that's very boring, and that's very much colour gel heavy 80s, but make it a bit slow and art house kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Of well, it's got Scott Brothers connection, hasn't it? I mean, I
Yeah.
suppose that's inevitable.
Yeah, but I think I was trying to think, if you were going to remake, and I mean remake, not do a sequel or a soft reboot type thing. If you're going to remake The Hunger in this day and age, the Blaylock character would have to be female, because it's only females that have got those kind of eccentricity type personas now.
That's very true. Yeah, particularly if you're talking about musicians. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think this is really a part for Shawn Mendes somehow.
No, it's Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because we've seen his acting chops in Game of Thrones.
I've been alive for thousands of years, and on each of them, I gave myself another terrible tattoo.
I've been alive so long, I've run out of mathematical symbols for my album. I've done calculus, differential and integral.
Yes.
I've done pi.
Yeah, I mean, the most Bowie-coded mainstream pop star there is now is still probably Lady Gaga, and it feels like, in her wake, she allowed female pop stars to be a lot more colourful.
Yes. So I'm thinking this time round it will be a vehicle for a Gaga, maybe an Eilish, if she decided to, bust out some acting chops.
Yes, no, I completely agree.
I can't think of a single male artist who's got that level of presence that Bowie has.
You would have to. Yeah, presence is a good
way of putting it. Like, there are male artists who I find
interesting, but you would have to go some way into the indie, particularly like the indie R&B and hip hop sector, to find someone that colourful. And I think
by the time you're digging that deep down, you're losing what Bowie brought to this.
You're losing the commercial impetus of doing it. You're losing the sort of shock factor of seeing someone who, at the time, was one of the biggest pop stars in the world, getting old. Which, as I said at the start of the show, we are still in this era where the cries of never trust anyone over 30 are ringing in pop fans' ears. You are not supposed to be an old rock star.
No. Indeed. Are you listening, Morrissey?
Yeah, maybe we could stand to go back to those times in a lot of ways, really, couldn't we? Yeah. So that's interesting, and I think the old age makes it fantastic. It's so much better than anything that was around at this time in the 80s. Yeah.
Because again, that sort of whole, the prosthetic side of makeup was still very much in its infancy. I mean, we're still a few years away from the tall guy, and because there's some prosthetic makeup in that which was very effective. We're a long way away from that.
Yeah.
In terms of cinema time, we're 4 years away from that. 5 years, something like that.
Well, I think what 80s prosthetics is very good at is things like The Elephant Man, things like American Werewolf in London, where it's a big dramatic change. It wouldn't be until I think the 2000s that you regularly had lightweight prosthetics that didn't bulk out
Yeah,
people's
yeah.
faces and bodies to the point where you could see that it was prosthetics. So this is uncannily good with those
Yes.
restrictions.
Yes, and no one walks away with a funny-looking moustache like when they, de-age Henry Cavill in Justice League.
Oh yeah. God, that was bad. That wasn't de-aging, wasn't it? They were literally
No, it was detaching.
detaching him. Yeah, they just gave him
It
a
was basically
digital
virtual depilation.
I wish I'd have known. I could have come to him. We've got Turkish barbers on every street in Middlesbrough. Come over and see us.
What I can't understand is why they didn't think it was easier to let him shave for the Justice League reshoots and then use a fake moustache on the film he was in.
Well, that's just studio pissing contests, isn't it? Because they weren't planning to have him around for the shoot, and once they did, Mission Impossible started playing hardball, and the whole very funny situation happened.
Tom Cruise could have been the stunt tash.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that I will give this movie credit for, this is almost an accidental way in which it's ahead of its time, but it's quite funny to me that the fact that this movie is so posed and everything's meant to look like a fashion shoot means that the lesbian scene is massively less sleazy than you would get from any other mainstream Hollywood movie in the 80s.
And well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because
it doesn't look like sex. It looks like two women who were just sort of posing for the Emporio Armani shoot in bed with each other. And it's only like about halfway through that you think, oh, they're supposed to be having sex, isn't it? Is that what's happening?
But I think also it kind of reflects a sort of refreshing innocence of the time in that we didn't have access to the internet, and therefore blokes, and the director was a bloke, didn't really know what lesbian sex looked like.
They didn't, but I think there are many worse cases of male directors trying to guess at what it looked like. We are pretty close here to the Joe Esterhazy era of erotic thrillers, and I think that shows this film in a very good light comparing it to some of those.
But I think the other thing is as well that a lot of the time in sort of 1983, well, sort of a few years either side of it, anything like that was there for shock factor.
Yes.
Well, if the lesbian sex scene in this is the thing that gives you the shock, well, you haven't been watching.
Yeah, it's very true.
The whole thing, because it does break the mold with the vampire thing. This isn't these aren't vampires who pierce the neck. There's no 2 puncture wounds in the jugular.
Nope.
They've got a special tool. These are tooled up vampires.
They're
from the West Side.
Yeah, and it has a lot of interesting and original spins on it that I assume, and vampirism, that I assume are from the source novel. I was flawed to discover that this was flawed, deeply flawed. I was badly flawed to discover that this was based on a novel by Whitley Strieber.
Who?
Whitley Strieber, I became aware of because he was like the most high-profile person during that sort of alien abduction craze of the late 80s, early 90s to come out and say that he believed he had been abducted by aliens. And so he wrote he was sort of a Michael Crichton figure before this, not as successful, but, he wrote...
I mean, who is?
Who is, exactly, yeah. But he wrote sort of page-turning airport thrillers, often with a kind of supernatural tone. And his later output is almost exclusively, what the Zeta Reticulans did to my bumhole.
Right.
So yeah,
I mean,
that's
I can think of catchier titles.
Yes.
But I'll grant you, at an airport terminal, it would catch the attention.
Yeah. I'd go for it, but I'm not sure I would read it when sat next to someone.
Especially if the cover art is particularly literal.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was quite odd. But I assume Stryber's book is where you have a lot of the sort of fun, particularly with the aging stuff. The aging stuff is quite nice because that's in Dracula, but it's one of those bits of Dracula that very rarely makes it into film and TV
Yes.
versions of Dracula. So picking up on that, I think, is a good idea.
Yeah, and I think this is the key thing about, and again, because of the birth of the internet, and I was talking to a colleague at work the other day about how the age of convenience of streaming has also taken away that the sensory nature of entertainment, the tactile, experiential element. You know, there are no water cooler moments anymore because not everybody watches the entertainment at the same time.
Yes.
You know, if you're in a situation where you and I both big Doctor Who fans, if there's a massive Doctor Who plot culminating on a Saturday night, we both know that we get to watch it on Saturday night, and on Sunday morning we can phone each other, or back in the old days, we can meet in the park.
Yes.
At the phone booth so that we can phone our mate.
Back in the old days of 2021, I think that was.
And we can talk about it, and we've both experienced it at the same time, and we know. Whereas now, have you watched season 2 of Fallout? Oh no, I'm waiting till they all drop. You know.
Yeah. But that phenomenon of like the staggered TV season release suggests to me that streaming and Silicon Valley are having a bit of a buyer's remorse about what they've invented.
Yeah.
Like the fact that the last season of Stranger Things has included about as many chapters as there are episodes.
Yes.
Is a sign that maybe they've realized this thing where you drop a whole season on one day, people are meant to watch it in one day, and then 3 days later they've forgotten it happened.
Yes.
This isn't great for keeping awareness of your show in the public.
But the problem is you couldn't do a film like The Hunger now that so differently portrays vampires, because the internet would kill it dead before it even got released. The minute it got leaked that these vampires aren't harmed by garlic, for example, or these vampires don't have to stop and count matches if you drop them in front of them. Whatever bit of vampiric lore it is, you'll get half the internet will support you because you're doing something new and exciting with the vampire mythos, and the other half will shoot you down in flames because you're just wrong.
Yeah. And the irony of that,
and then there's Twilight fans who are just bothered about whether they glow or not.
Yeah. This is completely untrue to vampire lore. None of them even go near a high school. The irony of it is that this film ends by rupturing its own mythology, as Susan Sarandon complained that it had set up this very clear pattern where Catherine Deneuve's Miriam, the queen vampire, stays young forever, but the people she turns have to keep feeding in order to stave off extremely rapid aging. And then it just doesn't happen to her character at the end because the studio said, look, we might need a sequel to this. Is there anyone left at on the table at the end of this?
Yeah, and wouldn't it be funny if they actually did it as a sequel now, what, 42 years later.
A legacy sequel. They're all of age now.
Oh, no.
I have to say the one character who I think is left standing at the end of it and is, to me, the real hero of it is Dan Hedaya as the cop. Not just because Dan Hedaya is always great, although he is, but he gets the funniest single moment in it, where after this incredibly loud, incredibly histrionic scene where all of Miriam's mummified former lovers kill her, Dan Hedaya just opens the door and goes, "Hello? Anyone home?"
He's very much the Benedict Wong of his time, isn't he? Yeah. It's really only those pacing bits and the slight plot flaws, and they are slight, let's be honest.
It holds together about as well as a film that is just unapologetically style over substance should. Like, you can't complain that you're being cheated. It announces that from the start.
Yeah. You know, those opening scenes in the club, it shouts, "I am going to look fantastic for the next couple of hours." That's all I'm promising.
100%, yeah. And it does.
Yeah.
You know, you can't possibly say that you're being shortchanged there.
No. I think the soundtrack overall matches the film. Yeah. And it's consistent. It's a consistent tone. They don't mess around with different genres and different styles. And
well, there is a bit of that. I think the one break in it is quite a funny break where, you know, there's a lot of classical music on the soundtrack. There's the flower duet, which we alluded to at the start of the show. Bowie actually learned to play the cello for this part. But there is also a scene where Blaylock tries and fails to subdue a guy roller skating in a back alley. On him.
And isn't that just so? It's almost like that's a nod to the subway scene in Clockwork Orange.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. But the other more explicit nod in it is that he's listening to Fun Time, an Iggy Pop song that is co-written and produced by David Bowie.
Yeah.
Which is great. I love Bowie's films often have that little meta moment, don't they? It's like that bit at the end of Man Who Fell to Earth where Rip Torn's walking through the record store. And of course, they've got a lot of vinyl copies of Young Americans stacked up. It's like he's such a presence that you have to have this little moment that says, "Look, we know it's David Bowie. Just go with this, okay?"
Yeah.
But could have had it in Last Temptation of Christ, you know. Could have, before Pontius Pilate comes on, we could have had Judas listening to Tonight.
Or The Man Who Sold the World.
That would be good. Yeah, that should have been what the actual Temptation scene was soundtracked by. It's thematically apt. Yeah.
Oh dear. It was good fun watching Lulu do that on the Hootenanny this year.
I did not see that bit. I saw a bit of the Hootenanny this year, but I didn't catch that bit. That's nice.
Yeah. That was quite good. I mean, as enjoyable as any of New Year's Eve was through the fug of snot I had built up in my sinuses, but there you go.
One of those, was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a really bad flu in August, and I think it's made me indestructible. I feel good about this.
Well, that's buggered that then, hasn't it? The fact that you've now said you're indestructible means you'll go down with long COVID tomorrow.
Yeah, well, you know, I didn't get COVID, and I kept waiting for my phone call from Anthony Fauci saying we want to study your superior genetics. It never came.
Is it because you were secretly drinking bleach?
That's it. Yes. Yeah. Can't do that anymore because of health and safety.
I know. Health and safety gone mad.
Yes.
Right.
I think this is nature's way of telling us that the podcast is reaching
I think
an end.
so. Yes.
Yeah.
I think we've given the hunger a good going.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think listeners should seek it out, and don't try and go in with it with realistic expectations. Don't confuse it with the Steve McQueen movie Hunger, or you'll spend the whole thing going, when does Bobby Sands show up?
Yeah. Or you'll spend the entire thing going, what were those two on about? I haven't seen David Bowie once yet. Do try and seek out the series if you can. It is interesting. It's only tangentially linked to the hunger, and it explores the theme of hunger rather than in all its different definitions, rather than being a sort of vampiric anthology.
Yeah.
And if you find the Bowie episodes, let me know where.
Yes, thank you for listening. If you'd like more from Pop Screen, including another Bowie celebration, as Simon and I review his 1979 film Just a Gigolo, you can find it on Patreon at www.thegeekshow.com/Patreon. We'll be back in a fortnight's time with more on this feed. But until then, I've been Graham.
And I've been Mick.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.